Okay, thank you. We are going to jump into how to do safe system assessments and then get you out there doing it. Let me share my screen, get some slides up and running. Kathy, you can, oh, you got my emails. Okay, you don't want that there, can you see something? Cool, okay. So, this session, we're going to point you at some safe system assessment guidelines and the safe system audit guidelines, the recently released ones from Wakatahi. But the focus will be on really the mechanics of filling out a safe system assessment matrix, and that's the meat of a safe system assessment, if I can use that term again. And then just the sort of supplementary material that's around there in a report. Now, I will talk about safe system audits, but I'm going to sort of focus on the safe system assessment if you were to do one of those as an isolated thing, which you still can do in New Zealand, but certainly if you go to any other jurisdiction you would, and if you want to get on some different registers around Australia, if that's something you're interested in, as in be a sort of accredited safe system assessor, you need to know how to do that standalone report. But we will sort of focus it back in on utilising the recently released safe system audit guidelines from Wakatahi and use that template when we go and start to practice it in some live safe system assessing. Or we'll at least use the setup. Anyway, I'll get to that at the end. We'll get to that at the end. We haven't talked too much about categorizing treatments into primary or supporting. Some people who have been doing road safety audits in more recent times have embraced the primary or supporting in terms of categorization of treatments we deploy on the road network in different scenarios, and whether they're primary, which means really something that's going to give a step change in trauma outcomes and virtually eliminate death and serious injury, or supporting, which is, you know, lots of stuff that's good, and we don't say it's bad stuff, but it's just not going to expect, we're not expecting we'll eliminate death and serious injury by doing those sort of things. Okay, so just recapping here, we've gone through the philosophy of the safe system and had a chat about all those different principles, and I think you're all really well up to speed on this and comfortable with it all. So I don't need to spend any more time on that, but it was important to do to ensure that we've got this good, consistent understanding of the safe system as we go to assess things in their alignment. Then we talked about exposure, likelihood, and severity, and we just kept talking about it. Every time we'd be doing little exercises, we'd be talking about what's exposure, what's likelihood, what's severity, and I really feel people are now getting that clear in their mind. Your assignments were pretty good overall. A few people still just clarifying a few things. Last session helped out a bit, and we will be using that in your assignment at the end of this session when we tell you how to get into that. The severity aspects, we delved into kinetic energy within crashes. We looked at these sorts of curves, and we had discussions about lots of other crash types and changes in velocity in crashes, the delta V. And then we pointed you at this one, which we created to assist people in making those judgments. It is, you know, it's a general indication only. You still need your professional judgment, and you'll adjust things as accordingly, but at least helps a little bit of guiding in terms of how severe some of these crash types might be. Now you'll see there we've got these numbers 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. They are going to be very important in the next few slides as we start to try to quantify alignment with safe system principles and actually put some numbers to things. And there's some more speeds, angles, sort of what people talk about as threshold speeds or minimum, maximum acceptable sort of speeds and angles and things like that. They're in there for your reference in these slides, which will help you when you're thinking about the severity of the crashes. But it's into now, okay, how do we actually write this thing up? What do we look at? How do we specifically put it all together? And that's documented in this, the Austroads Safe System Assessment Framework, which was released in late 2016. It's been out for quite a few years now. I was on the working group for this. I wasn't one of the authors of it, but was in quite a number of workshops discussing elements of this framework. And it was really interesting. So, but before that, one of my colleagues and I were doing things we called safe system audits, actually, back in the day, different to what Katahi's put out now. But the principle was to try to assess projects' alignment with safe system principles. And so we were doing a few of those. Nobody had particularly much interest in it, but there was a guy in Western Australia doing it. Colin Brodie in New Zealand had some ideas on how things could be done, and Austroads really got into that position and said, well, there's a lot of interest in the safe system emerging now. There's a lot of people talking about or having arguments about whether things are safe system or are not safe system, and it'd be good to have some sort of way to assess either existing infrastructure or new infrastructure for how well it aligns with these principles of the safe system. And so they commissioned this document, put together, and not a lot of safe system assessments had been done at the time. In fact, none under this format. There was a few sort of practice things done within the development of this, but really, since it got released and then it started to get a bit of traction, and then lots of safe system assessment being done, they've found some deficiencies, some things that were unknown or undefined in this document. So industry's developed a little bit of a way of operating. The bulk of it is covered in this document, but there are a few things that you might discover that are different, a little bit different to what's documented here, or are just not defined in this. And I'll take you through some of those, and we've got some of those fact sheets that help you with some of the things. But the jurisdictions then started to produce their own supplementary things to sit under that Austroads document to clarify some of that, to help people make decisions on when safe system assessments would be done, and as what he's done to integrate road safety auditing and safe system assessments together in the safe system audit guidelines. Now, these two documents, the Victorian one and the South Australian one, they actually clarify some of the specifics of how to do the assessment and the scoring and those sorts of things. This one really doesn't do anything extra in that perspective. It sort of just clarifies more about how, like when you would do safe system assessments, in the who can do them and those sorts of things, or safe system audits as they're termed within this document. So what I'm going to do today is go through the process of doing a safe system assessment. It's consistent with how you would fit it in at the start of a safe system audit. It's also consistent with how Austroads sort of issues that instruction on how to do it, but also the general consensus of industry through these two documents, also the way Queensland, New South Wales are doing them, and New Zealand has been doing them and will continue to do them, just integrated into the sort of first bit of this document. Okay. Now, Kathy, I don't think we've got a poll for this session, do we? Well, maybe we do have a poll. Yes, we do. So now I'm just wondering, just to get a gauge of what this group's level of involvement with safe system assessments has been. The question is, what has your involvement been with safe system assessments? So I'm not specifically talking about safe system audits because they're new, obviously, but safe system assessments, which have been around and being done in New Zealand for quite a number of years. We got nothing. Safe system what now? Heard the term, don't know much more. Had one done on one of my projects. Done one. I live, breathe, and eat safe system assessments.
And is that like meaty safe system assessments or mushroomy safe system assessments?
I live, breathe, and eat the tofu version.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, we've just about got everyone in, so I will I'll end that one now. So the vast majority is sitting in the term, I've heard the term, but don't know much more.
That's
7 people have done one. That's good.
That's good, isn't it?
8 people have had one done on their projects.
Yeah. That's great. And yeah, I don't know if we've been collecting this data over the sort of, whatever it is, 6 years we've been running safe system assessment training, but certainly at the start it was everybody down in the those early days. Nobody had any, and it's shifting along, and we've got 2 people living and breathing and eating safe system assessments, and maybe they're taking advantage of the fact that they know we don't know who's answering this, and I can't quiz them on that.
Well, Dan's asking, I've done about 4 or 5. Is that living and breathing?
Oh, that's pretty good, actually. That's excellent. We'll let you into that category. Okay. Well, the mechanics of the safe system assessment process really starts with understanding the context of the project. And Austroads put in these prompt questions that said, you know, before you do a safe system assessment or in gathering your information and understanding, you need to get an idea of the context of the project. Why are they doing the project? You know, what's the future of this road? What's the movement in place or one network framework categorization? And, you know, are there going to be changes to the function or the land use? What's the speed environment, and have commitments been made on anything associated with speed or changes or anything like that? What road users are present? Is there any special activities that we might need to be aware of? And what's the vehicle composition and what's it predicted to be? So you can see they help you gather understanding. Now, you may know a lot of this from knowing the area or knowing the intersection. It may be an area you're not that familiar with, so you're getting good understanding. Utilizing this, you may ask them for planning studies, design reports, any sort of land use studies or things, speed data, crash data, other information. Basically anything to help you get a rounded understanding of this project that they're planning, or if it's just the existing area, anything they can tell you about the existing area. So when doing a safe system assessment, it seems to be good to send these questions through to the project team early on. Say, we want to gather a bit of an understanding of the project. If you can answer any of these and provide any documents that might help. Now, you might want to add some other questions yourself, and there's nothing stopping you doing that. Yeah, that can be very useful. And then you may have like this sort of commencement meeting where you all sit around, look at the design, you know, roll out the roll plot of the design or have it on screen, and the project team and the designers explain it, and you can ask lots of these questions. You can ask other questions to get that understanding. So I'm going to jump now all the way to one of the end outputs. One of the things that would be produced from a safe system assessment. And then I'll build this from the start. But I wanted to jump right to the end so you see sort of what are we trying to produce here? What are we trying to produce? And this is, yeah, one of the key sort of outputs you'd expect is some sort of graph like this. And the graph has on the side safe system alignment score on the y-axis. So that is a score out of 48 that shows how well or not well this particular crash type aligns with safe system principles. The best alignment would be a 0. The lower numbers are better. So maybe think of these a little bit like risk. I mean, they are to a degree crash risk, as it says here, but it's sort of safe system assessment crash risk. And I'll explain why that. They are very much the same, but there are slight nuances of differences. But you see down the bottom, we've grouped these into run-off road, head-on, and intersection crashes. Then pedestrian crashes, cyclist crashes, motorcycle crashes. And there's one that's called other, which is a real catch-all for anything that isn't adequately captured in those other crash categories. And then, you know, this is a sort of nice pictorial description because we know that the orange option is roundabout. The blue option is a modified T intersection with traffic signals, and the grey is a T intersection with traffic signals. The red there, that'll be the existing conditions. They do nothing. That's what it is. So immediately you can sort of see from this where you're getting benefit from doing these different treatments and where you're not getting benefit. And sometimes we see things like lots of good benefit on the roundabout for a lot of the different crashes, but it seems to go up for cyclists. So, you know, that tells us something immediately. So you're able to gather a little bit of crash risk information using this immediately. So let's go back now and let's look at how do we get to producing something like this. Well, we use a thing called the safe system matrix or the safe system assessment matrix. And it's a table like matrix, just call it a table if you want. And you'll notice it's got 3 rows: exposure, likelihood, and severity. So that is why I was banging on about exposure, likelihood, severity, because you have to now fill out a table here, a matrix, and categorize things into exposure and likelihood and severity. And the columns are these crash types. So run-off road, head-on, and intersection. These are vehicle related. So this is run-off road for a car or a truck. Head-on crashes is car to car or car to truck head-on crashes. Intersection is where, yeah, 2 vehicles going through an intersection crash, and there's some specific, there's some nuance with that, because if 2 vehicles were going through an intersection, they were both going straight, and one sort of drifted off their path and they head-on crashed, that is a head-on. That's categorized as head-on. Even though it happened within the extent of the intersection, it's a head-on crash. Likewise, if a vehicle was to be coming along and try to turn at the intersection, didn't hit any other vehicles, spun and ran off the road and hit a power pole within the sort of intersection, that is a runoff road crash that we're thinking about. Now, we're not doing crash analysis in this process, but what we're doing is predicting crashes in our mind, and those sort of predictions, I'm just showing you where they would be categorized. So these ones are vehicle-related crashes. Now, other, I'll come back to because it's a catch-all, as I said. Anything that's not covered. Now, a lot of them might be vehicle-related, but there is possibility it could be something else. Now, pedestrian crashes. Pedestrian crashes are any crash anywhere on the network where the pedestrian is the one that is going to be killed or seriously injured or have other injuries. So that could be at an intersection, the pedestrian's crossing and a vehicle strikes the pedestrian. It could be standing, pedestrian standing at a bus stop and vehicles leaving the road and hitting the bus stop. So the mechanics of the crash might be run off road, but the injured party is the pedestrian. Now, in that example with the vehicle running off the road and into a bus shelter or the like, we'd be talking about the pedestrian crash risk there, so we'd be accounting for it there. If we believe that the vehicle occupants could also be injured, maybe the bus shelter was a rigid structure or something like that, then we're also thinking about it in the run-off road category as well. Likewise, we've got cyclists. Cyclists are any crash anywhere on the network where cyclists are the ones that will be injured or killed. So it could be at an intersection. It could be cyclists running off the road on shared paths. It could be anything, anywhere. And motorcyclists the same. So that motorcycle one covers quite a raft of all of these, run off road, head on, and intersection, but it's just where the motorcyclists are involved. The other category then tries to capture anything that we haven't got in there. Now, like the common things we see coming out in the other category for crashes people are predicting or thinking about sideswipe crashes. They're not accounted for really anywhere else. That's vehicle-to-vehicle sideswipe crashes. Crashes with animals. If you've got a lot of particularly unique road users that commonly could have been categorized as pedestrians or people attempted to categorize as pedestrians, you can sometimes set them into the other category. And so e-scooters is probably one there which tends to get pulled there into the other category and assessed in their own unique column, just due to they're not a pedestrian, they're not quite a cyclist, so they get that look. What else have I got? So rear end crashes is a really interesting one, and there was a lot of debate around the different groups around Austroads about how to deal with that. Really, the end decision was if the rear end crash you're predicting has been generated from back of queue at an intersection, the queuing from an intersection or the like, they say that just categorize that in intersection. But if it's a mid-block or so that could be a mid-block school crossing or pedestrian crossing, we'll take that as an other. And what was another other I just thought of? Oh, railway level crossings. That's definitely sits within the other category. So they're the
Sorry, Ken, just another one. Did you say a side swipe or a rear end crash at an intersection? Is that an intersection or an other?
So a rear end crash generated from intersection activity is an intersection.
Yeah.
Side swipe crashes are going to be an other. Yeah, and it doesn't matter where, don't think about where these are occurring. Think about the crash type, if that makes sense. I know it says intersection, but we could have, that column could say cross traffic, right turn against, right through, emerging, right, all those different crash DCA codes. Is it DCA that everybody uses? Like there's too many around the different jurisdictions. I lose track. There's DCA, RUM codes, crash coding system. But anyway, like crash types, that these are all the intersection crash types. It doesn't, I mean, of course, an intersection crash type has to occur pretty much in an intersection. The other one in the other category could be emerging from driveways. If you've decided it's not an intersection, it's sort of an access point, you'd probably put that in the other category. Are there other questions there, Kathy?
Yes, indeed. It's caused a flurry. So I think we've answered then access ways are considered other. Can you give an example of an intersection related crash that's not head on, run off road, etc.?
Yeah. So, well, if you've got an intersection and you're worried about back of queue crashes, so there's a set of signals, and you go, well, it's got okay sight distance to the signals, but it then goes into this curve, which has really bad sight distance. So when vehicles are queuing from that intersection, there's going to be a point where vehicles approaching won't be able to see the back of the queue. They'll come around the curve and they'll rear end into the back of the queue. So that's actually an intersection crash. It's not happened like under this categorization. Yeah, it's not actually happened within the intersection. It's been generated as a result of the intersection, I suppose. So actually, that's probably one where the crash code would just be rear end. So good point.
So it's, if this is just me paraphrasing here, if I'm understanding right, it's because of the intersection that the crash has occurred.
Yes. Yeah, that's right.
Okay. Another question is, lots of sites don't have anything which really falls into that other category. Should we pick something which is remotely possible and rate that, or can we leave it empty? Okay.
You can leave it empty if you want. There's nothing, no issues with that. Most sites have something that would fit into the other category, albeit it might be very low either likelihood or severity. Side swipes usually pretty commonly available on the network. Driveways usually exist, or access points in the vicinity of an intersection or in a length of road. So those are usually, there's something in there. But yeah, there's nothing saying that you have to put something in there. You don't have to fabricate something if it's not there.
Yeah, okay. And Winston's saying, I guess, and an example of an intersection crash would be a typical right turn against crashes. Would that be another one?
Very common. Yep. Well done.
Yep. Okay, good price for you, Winston. I think that's covered off all of the questions so far. So do type them in if I haven't got to your question. I do have another one, Ken, that was on a little bit earlier, but we might get to that when you've finished this bit.
Okay. Just checking how we're going on some. Okay, we're doing all right. We will take our break in 20 minutes or so. I want to move through a bit of the actual putting assessment and scoring in each of these cells. So we've categorized. So we're getting our head around these crash categories. We certainly have got our head around what's exposure, what's likelihood, what's severity. And you can see here that we've got then cells of this matrix. So each of the boxes here that we're going to put some information into. Okay, and we want to end up putting a score between 0 and 4 in each of these cells. Okay, so between 0 and 4 for each of these cells. So let's start over with runoff road. Remember, that's for vehicles, and the exposure. Now you can see there that it just says AADT, annual average daily traffic. Just how many vehicles are using this road? That's what they're asking. And you go, oh, okay. How many vehicles are using this road? So let's say we've got some road and it's got, I don't know, 3,000 vehicles. There we go. We can write down the AADT is 3,000. Now that's certainly not between 0 and 4, is it? So we've got to somehow convert that AADT to a score between 0 and 4. And there is a thing called the Safe System Matrix Scoring Reference Sheet. Now I've reproduced this here. This is a direct copy out of Austroads. And it's got a score, and they're between 0 and 4, and it's got exposure, likelihood, and severity, and then it's got a description of what a 0 would be, what a 1 would be, what a 2, a 3, and a 4 would be. So let's look at what maybe a 4. We'll start at the top. A 4 for exposure would be vehicle volumes that might be involved in a particular crash type are very high, or the road is very long. Thus, exposure is very high. For runoff road, head-on, and other crash types, AADT is greater than 10,000 vehicles a day. For cyclists, pedestrians, and motorcycle crash types, volumes are greater than 100 units a day. So this is covering all of the different crash types. So greater than 10,000 vehicles a day when we're thinking about this runoff road. Okay, we said, where do we have? 3,000. Okay, well, let's go down to a 3. Same words, except for, volumes that might be involved in a particular crash type are high, between 5,000 and 10,000. The cyclists, motorcycle pedestrians, between 50 and 100. Okay, so let's go to a 2. Moderate, between 1,000 and 5,000. Okay, we've found our category there. So it's a 2. So we just put a 2 in. So what you do and I'll show you some safe system assessment matrices that are filled out. 3,000. So you'd write, AADT provided by client is 3,000. And then you just put 2 in there. There's no more to do on that. There's no more analysis to do. You were given data and you just put it there. Now, if you're not given data and nobody's got any data and you can't access any public systems it gives you, you got to just make a judgment call. And you say, we estimate that traffic volumes will be between 1,000 and 5,000. Thus, we've given it a 2. That's fine. You see, then head-on crashes is going to be the same. The only way that head-on crashes wouldn't be the same is if you had a central barrier system, and I'm going to go a little step further than that and probably say had a rigid central barrier system or a high containment level central barrier system. If you've just got a bit of median with curbing, no, doesn't cut it. Still exposure to head-on crashes, because we know vehicles can mount curbing easily. They go over these areas and head-on crashes still occur. The presence of your central median in that reduces the likelihood for sure, but we've still got the exposure. If you've got, central barrier systems on roads that high-speed rural roads, and they're sort of maybe a containment level 3 barrier system, you're in this sort of awkward position of saying, okay, is there any possibility of head-on crash anymore? And I always go, yeah, there is, because I know that a larger vehicle will breach this barrier system or the like. But the chance of that happening is very, very low. But I'm going to have to leave exposure at 3,000 or an exposure of 2. So I hope that makes sense. Yeah. I'll go to intersection and then I'll take questions on any of the first 3 that I've done. So intersection, there was a lot of debate on this one. The AADT you take is the addition of the legs. So if we've got our road that's got 3,000 and we've got another road that's got another 3,000, then our total becomes 6,000. And we go in and we look at our score sheet and we go, oh yeah, okay, so it's actually now at a 3. We get a 3. Okay. Questions, Kathy?
My word, Ken. Okay. So question about, I understand the safe system matrix scores applies to Australia. Do we have like this one specific to New Zealand circumstances for sure the volume of traffic, etc., different from Australia?
It's in the Waka-Kotahi guide and it's exactly the same. So that brings up a point. Don't think that this has some sort of precision to it. Okay, it's a broad brush assessment methodology, and it's a way to just flag areas of higher risk and lower risk, and it is what it is. So it's used in the same manner in New Zealand.
Yeah, and we'll show you the New Zealand guidelines, as Ari's already pointed to their pages 18 and 19. So yes, it is the same. Okay, so the question about Waka-Kotahi talk about people, whereas the Australian examples talk about units in the exposure matrix. What if cyclists or motorcyclists are 2 up?
It's not going to change. Like, that's far too precise.
Okay.
It's far too precise, because we're talking generally, are there, really low volumes, medium volumes, high volumes, or really high volumes? Think about it like that, okay? And it doesn't matter if, you get the occasional pillion passenger or, thing like that. It's just give us a general idea of the volume of people exposed to this crash. Good.
What about, yeah?
No,
I think we got some thumbs up there, so I think people are happy with that.
Was that you giving me thumbs up, Jeff?
No, it wasn't. It actually wasn't me. Sometimes it is me.
Yeah.
No, okay. Talk to us about head-on for one-way streets. I guess, do you consider head-on for a one-way street, given there still might be a chance of someone driving the wrong way?
Yeah, so another really good example of where you're in this dilemma. Do I knock that completely off the exposure of head-on and say there is zero exposure to head-on crashes? Thus, that whole column is rendered. We've eliminated exposure to head-on crashes. Or do I just say, okay, there's still exposure, but the likelihood is so low that, you know, that's going to, like, I haven't explained yet that we're going to multiply down these columns. And so, like, if you go, you can get your safe system benefit by basically eliminating the likelihood of crashes or the exposure to crashes. So the answer to that for me is I will put 0 on a one-way for exposure unless I believe there is reasonable confusion about how to get to that. So like that, if I go, actually, you know, it's not clear that this is a one-way street. And I think at 2 a.m, somebody may actually drive this and be confused. And so there's, you know, there is exposure there. Or if I go, no, this is good, this is all clear, I'm happy to go with 0 on head-on. But you'll discover either way, it's going to play out fairly close to each other on a one-way. It's going to be a very low product score for head-on crashes. It may just flag that lack of clear information to a road user that it's a one-way.
Okay, what about, where would you place animals crossing rural roads in the matrix?
Yeah, so that's an other. I mentioned that earlier. Yep.
Okay. And tell us about pedestrian volumes. So roads with pedestrian volumes over 100 are very common on urban roads in Auckland. A really busy pedestrian road will have pedestrian volumes of, you know, 1,000 plus. Giving both an exposure score of 4 doesn't differentiate well between them. So was the 100 plus pedestrians thing chosen by engineers who mostly did rural highways, or is there any information you can provide about that?
Yeah, so it's an interesting point. And I think actually whoever's written that has taken, I suppose, a bit of a negative view on it. It actually was a really positive view about active transport, because what it means is that pedestrians are given a high level of importance across all of the network, and there is no more sort of you know, these outer urban areas that have, that people go, oh, well, there's only, you know, there's only 70 pedestrians a day crossing, so we're not really gonna, you know, and that's a very high score in a safe system assessment for pedestrian activity, but they'll be, you know, they'll be often car-dominated areas. So anyway, the point is that yes, in urban areas, there is no differentiation in an exposure sense between 100, 1,000, or 100,000 pedestrians crossing at a location. There are facilities within a safe system assessment to make note of this. And when you get to the point of making recommendations and stuff, you're going to take that into account. But all you're just going to see is that pedestrians are going to spike heavily in exposure. Yeah, so I can understand people want to be very precise and add, you know, saying, why is it 4? Why can't we go up to a score of 100 for each of these cells? And then we could have that big thing. And that would be another way to go. But now you're starting to get into risk methodologies that are more akin to your Kiwi wrap or NRAM or things where you're putting in, huge amounts of variables. It's very sort of standardized spitting out. What this does, and it's part of the beauty of it, but it can be some of the deficiencies of it, is that it gives you a broad understanding of where things are good and where things are not so good. And it gives you freedom to assess the site as you see it. You are not locked into specific things like a Kiwi wrap assessment or an IRR or the like, where you go like, for 80% of the time, those things are great. Like they give you the right, but sometimes you just go like, this thing is not accounting for, these unique circumstances or this particular thing. And it's frustrating from that perspective. And they won't let you change anything. This one, you've got some freedom. So anyway, I hope that's a bit of it. Yeah.
Okay, we've got about 10 minutes to break time.
Oh, really? Wow.
Yeah, but great questions. And I think, a lot of this will be made clear as you continue to work through this, Ken. Thank you.
Yeah, I think you're right. Okay, let's keep going. So others are going to be AADT or the volume of whatever you've picked. So if you pick something completely different, scooters, for example, then you're going to have to go with that. And then you either you would then be going back to the non sort of qualitative ones, medium, high, very high. Think about it that perspective and make your judgment call as to how you will score that from that. Maybe you can. Pedestrians, yep, number of pedestrians crossing or walking along the road is going to be the dominating factor there. And you've seen it in the matrix. So maybe we've got an area that has low pedestrians and it's got maybe there's 10 or 15 crossing, maybe 20 crossing a day. Well, that's a 2. Cyclists, same thing. How many cyclists have we got? Maybe it's about the same. And motorcyclists. Motorcyclists, you can go sort of 1% of AADT or maybe 1 to 2% of AADT. So let's go then with a 2 for them, because that'd be 30. It's 3,000 at 1%, and that would also be a 2 because the motorcyclists, as you saw, they sit within this cyclists, pedestrians, and motorcyclists. Okay, so then you've got some scores and you've put your numbers in, and you might write a little bit of description as to how you arrived at that, if it was a prediction, if it was a count. And a lot of the time you're going to get given data here because most road authorities have really good vehicle data. Unfortunately, most of the time they don't have this data. They're getting a bit better, but a lot of the time you've got to make a prediction and assumption on that. I would love it one day in the future if we said, can we have any road user data that you've got, and we get comprehensive pedestrian counts, cyclist counts, and also vehicle counts as well. That would be good and helpful. At the moment, it is often that we are making some sort of assumptions based on knowledge, based on discussions with the project team. How many do you think? And off they go. So then you get into likelihood. Now, likelihood is going to factor in all of the things that you can see in this area or in the design that are going to influence the chance of a crash happening. And you can see some are listed there: speed, geometry, shoulders, barriers, hazard offset, guidance and delineation, could be surface, could be lighting. You're going to go out there and you're going to look at it. You're going to think, okay, what are the characteristics of this road environment that may make it more likely that people are going to run off the road or less likely that people are going to run off the road? And you start to dot point these out within this in the matrix. So you're looking at the site, you're dot pointing things out. Could be surface conditions, could be confusing line marking, could be sun. It could be an east-west alignment of the road, so the sun at certain points of the day may influence that. You can see there's an etc. there because, you know, these are not, it's whatever you see out there using your understanding of what influences likelihood. And then you've dot pointed all these things you've thought about, and you've listed things out, and you go back to your scoring sheet and you say, great, okay, let's see what we've got here. Crash likelihood, what's a 2? It is unlikely that a given crash type will occur. Ooh, that's not given us much information and help, has it? Okay, let's see what a 3 is. It's likely that a given crash type will occur. Oh, okay, 4's got some more words. Let's see. The likelihood of individual road user leading to a crash is high given the infrastructure in place, e.g. high approach speeds to a sharp curve, priority moving control, filtering right turn across several opposing lanes, high speed. So you've got some, you know, characteristics there that are fairly inherently increasing likelihood of crashes. Let's go down and see what a 1 is. It is highly unlikely that a given crash type will occur. Now, I hadn't really talked too much about 0 yet, but I'll talk about it here a little bit. There is only minimal chance that a given crash type will occur for an individual road user, given the infrastructure involved. Only extreme driver behavior and substantial vehicle failure could lead to a crash. Now, I'm going to say here, pretty much never use a 0 in likelihood, okay? Because you're accounting for people making mistakes, usual mistakes, falling asleep, being distracted, dropping their coffee in their lap, all of these things. So the elimination of likelihood is almost never. For exposure, the elimination of exposure is basically saying, like, there's no intersections. We've got a mid-block length of road, 0 exposure to intersection crashes. Or we've got that motorway and it's got a physical concrete median down the middle. There's really no exposure to head-on crashes. Like, there might be some, you know, once in every 50 years, some thing where a vehicle hits the median in some crazy manner and bolts it, and some, like, that's such a absolutely out there rare extreme event that we're not going to factor it into exposure. So we'll put a 0. No cyclists, no motorcyclists, no pedestrians. Those also, no cyclists, no pedestrians. No cyclists, like I'll often do no cyclists for a motorway. Now, I do know that you get occasional, like this is, if a motorway has got a ban, there's no cyclists allowed on the motorway. It's clearly marked no cyclists and it's very hard to access. We generally know that we don't get cyclists on there, and maybe once every couple of years, there's like a Dutch tourist who gets off the plane with their bike and rides the motorway. And that, you can capture a little bit of that thinking later on in a safe system assessment in general commentary and questions or the like. But for me, that's not enough to enter into an actual exposure for bikes. So with the likelihood score, it is subjective, okay? You are making a judgment. You're making a judgment, but I want you to think a little bit about your judgment based on relative likelihood of intersections around New Zealand, or in that relative sense. We know there's absolute, lots of characteristics of this particular location. It's got high speeds, it's got bad sight distance, it's got bad surface and signs are misleading, we're in the 4. This is all bad. We've got this other one, it's low speed, it's, speeds are low, really clear, good advanced warning, great sight distances and everything like that. And so we're going in the sort of 2s and 1s because we're very, we're thinking it's unlikely based on the infrastructure characteristics of this crash to occur. But hey, people are going to do, be distracted, they'll miss stuff, there could be foggy, it could be all sorts of reasons. There's still a chance. It's maybe you say it's highly unlikely. It's highly unlikely, but there's a chance. And so you go through then and you put lots of information in here, lots of dot points, things that you're noticing, things that you're thinking about. And then you put your score. And, you might, 3 maybe. So you might say, oh, we don't have sealed shoulders here. We don't have sealed shoulders. We've got a little bit of edge drop off. And we've got high speeds and a sharp curve. And we're into the likely, or actually, that would probably kick over to a 4 into very likely. So you might have some good line marking, good delineation, reasonable super elevation and those sort of things. So you're making your call on that. And you might go through and you've got to think about each one. And I'm just going to put some scores for our purposes of showing you how this is done. And you'll get to a point. You got that. So with pedestrians, for example, you're talking about, are there pedestrian crossing facilities? What's the length that they're having to cross? Is it well lit? All these different factors. So you've taken into account the number of pedestrians. So don't get in there and say, well, the likelihood of pedestrian crash is low because there's hardly any pedestrians crossing. No, you've already accounted for that. You've accounted for that up there. All right. You're now into just take the number of pedestrians out of your mind. What is it for an individual pedestrian trying to cross here that's going to increase their likelihood or decrease their likelihood of crash? Same for cyclists and motorcyclists. Motorcyclists tend to come out generally as high, if not higher, because you're sort of taking all of the run-off road head-on intersection crash types and adding in the factor of it being a motorcyclist. So they're often as high, if not higher. Okay, that's likelihood, Kathy, and I'll take questions on likelihood before we jump into severity, or maybe even we take our break.
Let's take questions, but probably not on likelihood, but they might still be coming. There is a likely chance people are typing now. Tell us,
is there a thumbs down emoji for that?
No, there isn't. Sorry about that. Too bad. I can just hear the collective groans. Can you provide some advice on how to judge pedestrian numbers in the absence of any actual data? Often all we have is observations from the site. Brief observation.
Yeah, I'd say talk to the people who know the area, get their estimates on it, be out on site for a little bit, and just make a judgment call yourself.
And similarly, is that what you do to get cyclist numbers as well?
Yep.
Can you take a percentage off AADT?
No. No, for motorcyclists you can, but not for cyclists or pedestrians.
Yeah. Okay. Maybe one day we'll get the data. Who knows? Okay. Just to recap, so if you're analysing an intersection for the safe system assessment, you're filling in everything in this table.
Correct.
Yes. Yeah.
And some things may not, like head-on crashes at intersection becomes when you're just looking at an intersection, you sort of think about the lead in and through the intersection for head-on crashes. It doesn't make as much sense as if you're looking at a route, but you factor it and you think about it just the same. Yep.
Could you confirm whether cyclist exposure is determined by vehicle AADT and cyclist numbers or just cyclist numbers? If it's dependent on both, what if you have a very high vehicle AADT, so say a score of 4, but very low cyclist numbers, say a score of 2? What do you use? Looks like you're going to give us an illustration.
I'm just crossing out AADT. So that it's a very good, it's a prize-worthy question, because Austroads put it in there, but that's exactly right, as whoever's Sophie's pointed it out, is that we actually just factor it on the number of pedestrians, number of cyclists, number of motorcyclists, regardless of the number of vehicles. Because if you see in the scoring reference sheet, they got it right. But in this one, they added AADT there. Now, in one sense, I think somebody had talked about AADT as the T being traffic, being also potentially pedestrians and cyclists. So you, in theory, could do an AADT for cyclists. It's the annual average daily traffic of cyclists. But yeah, that then they also have this cyclist numbers. So just the cyclist numbers. When you're using the scoring reference sheet, it's obvious because it just says, is there more than 50 pedestrians? And then that's it. That's a 2 or 3. Sorry, a 3.
Okay, I think that's all we've got for now, but I guess that does mean there weren't any likelihood type questions, or maybe everyone's okay with that. So should we have a break and then come back for severity?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's have a 3-minute break?
Sure thing. Okay.
See you in 3 minutes. Okay, so I'm going to pick up now and look at the severity of crashes. So I think people are comfortable with the likelihood. I was just reading the chat there. Nothing yet. Anybody wanting specific clarification on that? A good question in the Q&A there around just generally how you get the context of the project and the like. That one, yeah, you may end up not getting as much useful stuff as you want out of the designer or the project team, and you may have to make some judgment calls and the like yourself, but see what you can get and carry on. Okay, so for severity, it's similar to likelihood in the sense that we look at the site and we put that lens of, okay, a crash is now happening. What are all the factors that are going to influence the outcome, the severity of this crash that we're sort of predicting could happen? And you can see there's less variables, there's less things that are really going to influence this. But the speed, the rigidity of roadside hazards, the percentage of heavy vehicles can be in there, impact angles, pedestrian, cyclists and motorcycle speed is just overwhelmingly the most influential factor. I'm not saying speed limit, I'm saying the actual operating speeds of vehicles and predictions in crashes. You could factor in there vulnerability of the bulk of the users. So that's like if you're assessing an area that's got a high percentage of elderly people in the area, you may bump up your severity a little bit, just in terms of if crashes happen, the severity is going to be higher, most likely. So then your scoring reference sheet in these occasions has some reference to our kinetic energy thresholds. And you can see here, so let's take a 4, for example. Should a crash occur, it is highly likely that it will result in a fatality or serious injury to any road user involved. Kinetic energies are high enough to cause fatal serious injury crashes, and it is unlikely that forces will be dissipated before reaching the road user. So what do they mean by that? Well, they mean something like a barrier or a cushion, for example, would dissipate energy before it reaches the road user. So FSI, straight out of Austroads, fatal serious injury, you probably use KSI, but same thing. So we're thinking about those kinetic energies in the crashes. If we go down to maybe a 2, should a crash occur, it is unlikely that it'll result in a fatality or serious injury to any road user involved. Kinetic energies are moderate, and the majority of time are effectively dissipated before reaching the road user. So we'd have low speeds, or we'd have barriers in place, or crash cushions, or these sorts of things. If you look at a 0, should a crash occur, there is only minimal chance that it will result in fatality or serious injury to a relevant road user. This might mean that kinetic energy transfer during the crash are low enough not to cause fatal or serious injury, or that excessive energies are effectively redirected or dissipated before being transferred to the road user. And then it says here, users may refer to safe system critical impact speeds for different crash types while considering impact angles, roadside hazards, and those sort of things. And so this is where we sort of created this one to help out a little bit more. We're not taking away all of the judgment and your own take on it, but it's a little help to guide you. So you're able to say, well, okay, I'm looking at this design and I think that there could be a crash here where a vehicle leaves a road and hits a tree. It's a 60 km/h environment, but maybe because of the geometry of the road, I really think they do this. It's going to be lower speed than that. It's going to be very hard to ever be up at those sort of speeds over that. Maybe in the 50-ish range, we go in and maybe we're saying there, okay, I'm in somewhere down there in the 3 category, and that's your decision. Or you'll say, well, actually that tree, all the trees, they're actually quite far offset from the edge line. So we're going to not only leave the road at around 50, but they're going to wash off some speed as they enter into this roadside, and it brings it down maybe a bit more in here. And I'm actually going to go a 2 on that one. That's the kind of thinking that you might be going through. So then you go and you put some dot points in there around the things that are influencing the severity, and you might put in your scores here. Actually, it'd be weird if you had a run-off road as a 2 and then a head-on as a 1. Actually, no, it wouldn't, because head-on crashes you can take a lot more force. If we go back to our diagram there, if your whole impact there was sitting in at a 2, head-on's probably going to happen about the same speed. Well, maybe it haven't washed quite as much off, maybe in there, but I suppose I factored into that one some wash off of speed, so it's probably maybe sitting up a bit higher. So yeah, these are the kind of ways you think about it. Yep.
Sorry, could you stay on that slide, the speed rainbow one, please? Gary's asking a question. Basically, anything over a speed of 30k is going to be a 4 for pedestrian and cyclists, and 50k for intersections.
Pretty much, yeah. Yep, that's right.
Okay. Great, thank you.
For side impact at intersections. So you might have an intersection and reconfigure it so your side impacts aren't available. And also remember, this is crash speed. This is delta V. So yes, if you had that intersection and the acceleration lane and you had merge points and an appropriate U-turn facility, you maybe could be going higher. Oh, sorry, I jumped ahead there. Okay, so you go through and you're putting all of these in there, and you get your scores out. So then, as I mentioned before, you go through and you multiply. you multiply down. So you multiply the 2, so 6, and then to say you're 12 out of 64. And you multiply all of them, and then you add up along if you want to get a final score out of 448. So if you happen to be able to put a 0 anywhere, because you're multiplying, you've eliminated it. So if perchance you didn't have any intersections, mid-block location, we don't care what the likelihood or the severity is, that's irrelevant because there's no intersections. Likewise, if you could absolutely hand on heart say nobody is going to crash here, then you don't care how many are exposed to it and what the severity is. There are going to be no crashes. And with severity, like this is a little disclaimer on this, but if you're able to say, hey, everything's within tolerable safe system energy levels, we're happy with it, we don't care how many are exposed to it and what the likelihood is. When all these crashes happen, people are going to be walking away or only having minor injuries. Now, the reason I say that is if you had like a 4 and a 4 and then a 0, you're going to have not a great location, lots of minor crashes and fender benders and these sorts of things. So you probably want to have a look at that. But in pure safe system thinking, we're okay with that. And we're about the health and protection of our community. So I think that slide got very messy. So let's look at one. I'll show you an actual real one. I might jump out if I get a second to a real safe system assessment, because this even is a bit scaled back. But you can see dot points for things that, and this is what you would do, things that increase the likelihood and things that decrease the likelihood. Things that increase the likelihood, things that decrease the likelihood. And then things that increase the severity, things that decrease the severity. So you're showing how you've come to make a decision on that score and justified it in that way. So before I just do a sort of very quick live example, and then I'll show a real one, Kathy, do we have anything I need to cover off?
We certainly do. Tell us about whole numbers versus decimal places. Can we do a 2.5, 3.5? How many decimal places can we go to?
Yeah, so original Austroads document was silent on the use of any decimal places. And at one point in one of the workshops, I did say, yeah, this was when people were saying, should we put numbers to this or should we just go with highs, mediums and lows like a normal risk assessment, right? And everybody was insistent on numbers because of the ability to put a 0 and show you can eliminate a risk. You can actually eliminate a risk if you meet some of these requirements, or virtually eliminate risk, right? But I was saying, well, if we give numbers to technical people, they're just going to run this off a cliff. And sure enough, within the first few years of safe system assessments, we saw some coming back with like 4 decimal place answers for the crash risk, the risk of run off road crashes out of, it was like a score of 37.4658 out of 64. And you're like, you just saw how subjective some of this is. There's no way there's that much precision. And so in the end, the Victorian government was the first to clarify that, and pretty much everybody's followed suit and said, try to stick to whole numbers. But if you absolutely must, we'll let you go to a 0.5. If you just can't, your team can't decide between these two, just go in the middle and that's okay. But no more precise than that. And even that is starting to get a little bit, yeah. Well, I'll talk about this actually in next module about how that report is often viewed by people. Like like they get the report, and we've finally in the road safety space got a report that looks very data-y, meaty. I mean, you get that out of an IRAP report or a IRR report or these sorts of things. You can make them look, but this one's really, so when they put down their SIDRA model or their traffic model, and it's got 60 pages of appendices of data and information, and they say, oh, the level of service will go from a B to a D, and everybody's like, oh, we can't possibly do that. And we used to say, well, we think that the crash risk will go up as a result of this, and they're like, yeah, no, we don't. We think it'll be fine because it's a very opinion. Now we're putting a set of data down as well and saying there it is. So sometimes I like, to a degree, I kind of liked it when there were those 4 decimal places from that perspective, because people are like, wow, okay, this is serious. But I knew it, I know that it's not that accurate, so we shouldn't really be putting that, that much specifics to it. Anyway.
Very good, thank you. And just on how what we're all phrasing the rainbow slide. Thank you. So just, of course, the eagle-eyed engineers here are saying, we also had someone calculate 88 out of 448 for you for your one that you did. So we have that sorted. Doesn't it say 40K and 50K are 3 for pedestrian and cyclists? So...
okay, well, let's just have a look then. We've got pedestrians and cyclists. Oh, yeah. Yeah, so it really starts to go, you can get into your 4s from anywhere in the sort of mid-50 ranges. So, yeah, I mean, that's not too bad in terms of, well, I mean, this graph got published by Austrad, so, and must have been generally accepted. So if you go back to here and you see what a 3 is, it's likely to result in fatality or serious injury, or highly likely at a 4. So at a 3, it's unlikely. Well,
no, at a 2.
Sorry, at a 2, yeah, you're right. So that kind of makes sense, because at our 30s and 20s, we would go, yeah, we're unlikely to result in death or major debilitating serious injury, but it can absolutely still happen. Like, we know that can happen. And so you might be making some adjustments accordingly. Yeah, good spotting. Yeah, so I think somebody else had said it was above 30.
Yeah. Okay, good. Carry on. Thank you.
Okay, so the way you do this is you might be given a site, and here's a site. It's an intersection. It's there. It's giveaway controlled intersection. It's there. Some pictures of the intersection. It's got some lighting. It's on a bit of a curve. It's got some other different features. We're not going to do a lot of analysing of the site, but they're proposing to upgrade it and say, well, we're thinking we might like a roundabout there, but we also might like to signalise that intersection as it sort of sits at the moment with that modified T's arrangement. Or we're also thinking we could make it a conventional T intersection with traffic signals and slip lane and the like. So they're the 3 options we're thinking of. And they've handed them over and they say, can you please do a safe system assessment on these 3 options? And so the first thing you do is you look at the site as it is now. Okay? It doesn't have that roundabout, doesn't have the signals, it doesn't have, it's just what's currently there. And you run through the assessment on it as you see it today. And what you do is you produce a matrix, nicely filled out, lots of good information in there, scores, everything, make sure you're really happy with it. And, my tip here is to spend your time on this. Don't jump straight into the designs, because you want to get this right. The reason you want to get this right and filled out with everything is because you then copy this existing conditions matrix, paste it, and then look at the design and say, what is the design going to change? And so you're looking at that design of the roundabout, and then you start to manipulate the existing conditions matrix, and you start to cross things out. You say, well, when that's built, that's not a factor anymore. We've eliminated that factor. Or that factor is now something that's going to reduce the likelihood. So things that disappear, you cross out, you do a strike through. Things that are new, you add in and you make them a different color so you can see that there's something different. Scores will change, and you highlight those scores that change. And you're giving then the team, the designer and the project manager and the team, an indication of, okay, what's changing, what are we doing, and what still remains. Then you go back and you take the existing conditions matrix and you paste it again, and you manipulate it for the next option. And you do it again for the next option. And so you do this for as many options that they give you to produce these matrices with these different annotations on it for the different options. So then you can get your options out. You can see for this one, the total scores out of 448. We can see the existing conditions at a score of 118.5. Okay, they're using 0.5s in there somewhere. A roundabout goes down to 90. Modified T, 99. Conventional T with signals, 105. So what that says at an overall picture says the roundabout design gives the best alignment with safe system principles, followed by the modified T and the conventional at this location. Everything is giving us better alignment with safe system principles. They're all less than that 118.5, but none of them are a 0. So nothing's got us the best alignment with safe system principles. Might want to graph that if you want, so you can see it, but same data there. And then this is taking us now back to where we started, and you can see that, okay, all right, the roundabout was the one that had the lowest total score, and you can see it's got better in all these areas, but cyclists. So that would be important, and I would be saying, okay, don't just look at the total scores, make sure you're looking at these as well, because you don't want it to be really great for all these crash types, except for one crash type which goes up and you implement it anyway, just because it was the lowest total score. So you get this wonderful information. And then what you do is you make recommendations on how they can alter every one of those designs that they've put out there to be better, to give us lower scores. And you'll use your matrix to identify things that are still there, increasing the scores, increasing the exposure or the likelihood or the severity, and you will suggest things to address that. And each of these recommendations that you make, you're going to put into the categorization of primary or supporting. I'm going to draw a line there because non-safe system treatments is really there for terminology purposes. You would not be suggesting non-safe system treatments, which are things that are going to make things worse. But I want you to think of these as buckets. I'm going to even draw little handles on, okay? Buckets of treatments. So the primary bucket of treatment has lots of different things in there. It's got roundabouts, it's got raised crossings, it's got continuous flexible barrier systems. These are all treatments that you might be wanting to deploy out there to make their design safer. The supporting has lots and lots of treatments in there too. It's got lighting, it's got good line marking, it's got better delineation, better warning signs, sealed shoulders, all these things. But the reason I want to talk about buckets is because you could have multiple primary treatment suggestions. You could have multiple supporting treatment. You might have no primary treatment suggestions and only supporting. But don't think of this as primary as my first. No, it's a whole suite of things that are good and that virtually eliminate, and I say virtually eliminate, the potential for fatal and serious injuries occurring. It doesn't necessarily virtually eliminate the crash, just the outcome, if it happens, is not going to be death or serious injury. And supporting are good things, improve road safety, not expected to virtually eliminate the potential for fatal or serious injury. And there's a little one here that says, it's not going to actually impact on the ability to get in a primary treatment in the future. So it's not often used, but like traffic signals on a high volume, high speed road is probably one where, putting that in makes it actually a lot harder to do something actually with high safe system alignment. So what you're going to do is make your suggestions, categorize them. Austroads has helped in this. In the Austroad Safe System Assessment Framework document, it lists a whole lot of treatment and it lists whether they're primary or supporting to give you some help. And I'm just going to, actually, no, how long do we have got for time here? Okay, no. What I want to do, just before I get into these prompt questions and then answer questions and then give everybody their assignment, or Kathy, you'll take people through that. I just want to show people what sort of a real safe system assessment might look like, if you don't mind, because I've sort of been showing some maybe a little bit Mickey Mouse ones, just to get us in the swing of things, but I grabbed a few just to look at. Sorry, Kathy. Here we go. Seeing my screen there?
Yeah, all good.
Okay, so you can see here, okay, this one. Now, you're free to play with the exact formatting as you want. I like to, and I encourage people to put little symbols to make it easier to remember which option is which, but this is existing as a T intersection. They're looking to signalize it. There's only one option in this one, and there you go. It's been graphed. There's what the outcomes are. It's going to improve things by a little bit. Okay, it's going to lessen the likelihood. So there's then a bit of summary of things that could be done, but I just want to jump to a few bits here. So there's a bit of explanation, context of the project, but here we go. You see, look, this is what we're talking about. Okay, we've got traffic volumes set in there, exposure. So there's not a huge amount of information there, but look, likelihood. You see lots of dot points, things that are increasing the likelihood. Goes over a couple of pages there, and then things that are decreasing the likelihood. So you can see it's not just just put a 2 in there, or just put a 3 in there. They're really thinking about it, justifying it, dot pointing things out, looking at approach, sight lines, alignments, all of this sort of stuff. Then we're into severity, and you can see again, there's lots of information, lots of dot points, lots of thinking around this severity before we get to scores and total scores. And then we're into the actual signalized intersection options, and you can see all the different changes that are occurring, strike throughs, new stuff being added, alterations, sort of goes over quite a few pages there. So, there's a bit of comprehensive thinking in there. It's not necessarily just a light check. And then, summaries, explanations, and into some recommendations, primary treatments, and supporting treatments. Okay, so I just wanted to show that. Actually, I had another one which I will just show briefly. Sorry, Kathy, I'm probably taking up more time than you wanted, but I think this one was interesting because it's more complicated. It's lots of options and sections. And so you see there, because somebody asked this earlier on, like, how do you do a route that's very changing and lots of different things? Well, you just break it up like that. You break it up into your sections and you get that output for each section. Okay, you could do this as one whole thing, but it kind of starts to wash out identification of particular risks. So that's more a comprehensive way of doing it, and then you're into lots of info. Okay, so that's that. Stop sharing there. Questions, Kathy, before I jump back into the.
Yeah, thank you. What about doing an SSA on a development where there's no existing conditions?
Yep. So you would simply do the design as a standalone. And it would get a score, and that score wouldn't be relative against anything. It would just be pointing out the areas that are higher risk, lower risk, and the like. It's the same. It's the same sometimes. Well, if you're doing like a town bypass and you're assessing that, you would assess probably going through the town as your existing conditions, and then the bypass route as the design conditions. So that's sort of your greenfield road one. But sometimes occasionally when it's just too complicated, like we were doing a safe system assessment of a major new freeway through a city, and it's just so complicated to try to work out existing conditions because people are taking all these different roads. Like, you can't do it. So you just go, we're not going to do that. We're just going to take the existing design, or sorry, like the design, and simply score it as a way to identify, where are things higher risk and lower, worse alignment with safe system principles, and what could be done out of those.
Okay. Question here says, with safe system assessments, they obviously tend toward roundabout treatments, the overall score. From your experience, in what instances or reasons why projects have, say, selected signals instead?
Well, I mean, they tend to roundabouts in certain environments with certain road users and crash risks because they're a really great treatment in these areas of high vehicle volumes and the like. But the signals have been chosen for often other reasons, management of, getting more congestion management and these sorts of things. But also sometimes the safe system assessment has identified that pedestrians and cyclists are coming out higher scores, and this area has got medium speeds maybe, and like a roundabout is actually going to not be helpful in a safety sense for pedestrians and cyclists, and the vehicles are within sort of tolerable levels. So then it sort of might shift towards signalisation. But what you want to do is make sure you're recommending things to keep speeds down through the signals. You don't want to create that high speed signalising section, so calming speed. So yeah, I mean, there are cases where those where signals have come out, absolutely, and people often, signals aren't going away. Just we need to manage them a bit better.
Okay, great. That's all.
Okay, I'm going to be quick here because I need Kathy to have enough time to explain what you're going to do. But there are these safe system assessment prompt questions which talk about general road safety questions that you will qualitatively answer. You're not going to put scores to these, but they might spring up some other ideas. They talk about road users. They talk about vehicles. They talk about post-crash care. I'm not going to go through each one of these. You can read these in your own time, and you can think about holistically safety in your safe system assessment. And this might be where you put something in that's completely sort of hasn't really been thought about. We're thinking here maybe about, do emergency services operate as efficiently and effectively as possible? So doing a safe system assessment around the Coromandel, thinking motorcycle safety was a bit of a focus, but it was a safe system assessment. So holistically thinking about all road users, and sort of that question brought up a lot of discussion around how long it takes to get to injured parties and how that can be improved, and whether helicopter landing pads built would be a good way. And some of those were trialed and built out there. And it's those kind of things that generate. That's not usually part of our infrastructure design, but it is part of road safety holistically. Thinking about enforcement, that's another one. It's popped out sometimes that you've got this beautiful design, this new road where you've got central barrier and outer barrier, and it's beautiful, and it's got all this great safe system alignment, and you go, well, sit down with the highway patrol and say, so will you be able to do enforcement on this road? No, they might say no, we've got nowhere that we can safely park our vehicle to do speed checks, to pull over vehicles. Our radars don't work because of objects in the road with that central barrier. We can only do this. And then you might think about, okay, can we tweak our design? Can we create a bay there, which might be an area where a speed camera vehicle could sit, or where we could put a pullover area? Maybe we can use this old stack site and we can actually have it so that police could be there waving vehicles down with a few small things. That's a real one. That actually happened. A Yan Yin Road was a great example there, where we're sitting with the police in these just a few questions, and then an old stack site was actually created into a booze bus area with a pullover area, number plate recognition vehicle bay sitting up the road, and it was like a custom built enforcement area. And it didn't really change the cost of the $102 million project. It was like nothing. They just tweaked the design a little bit. So you can get amazing benefits. So those questions you just go through, you talk about, you put some dot points around, they may generate ideas. That's it. They may help you actually adjust your matrix score in some specific circumstances. So I don't really need to include what would be in a safe system assessment report, because each jurisdiction's now come out with their templates. So you just use the template. Waka Kotahi's got the safe system audit template, you'll use that. If you're doing it in other jurisdictions, they'll have templates. We're going to give you one for your assignment to use to practice, and you can rebrand it your own, and off you go. So we'll do questions, and then I'll give a start on what your assignment is, and then Kathy will actually dive you into the learning management system and show you.
Yeah, and actually, Ken, I've got a question for you.
Mm-hmm.
With this is where you get frightened, isn't it? Where could this go? With Waka Kotahi and doing it as a safe system audit now, can you still do a safe system assessment as a standalone safe system assessment?
Absolutely.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
All right.
I mean, in New Zealand, this is a process Waka Kotahi's adopted, the safe system audit for their different programs and requirements. So if you are required by a client to do a safe system audit, you do a safe system audit in accordance with the Waka Kotahi guidelines. But if you're generally looking at areas where things are developing, you're in a council, you've got ideas, or even if you're in Waka Kotahi and you just want an indication of projects, and it's not a specific requirement as such, this can help you get an indication on safe system alignment and help you through in your decision making. It's an advice report piece. Okay. That safe system audit one is very good. I like it. It's a great thing. But this is very good in its own right as well, and was used for many years.
Great. Okay, we've got some questions and comments, and some have been answered. So often greenfield roads are designed with no thought given to any maintenance activity, and then Sean responds with safety and design principles should cover this. Robert goes on to say most designers, consultants never considered a real life experience of a major project with zero thought to any practical maintenance activity, and it's being built now. And yes, I'm sure everyone has examples of this sort of thing, isn't it?
Yeah, so safety and design is a good process to go through for that thinking. I think the safe system assessment, in those qualitative questions, you might put some comments around that. It is not a dedicated assessment on the ability to maintain, decommission, or the like, and that occupational health and safety. It may come in a little bit. It's really focused on road user safety, the safe system assessment process. So yeah, safety and design workshops and reporting, I think, is a good one.
Do you ever account for induced demand in a safe system assessment? As in, if you put some transformational infrastructure in, which makes the route more appealing, will you ever account for an expected increase in traffic, or is this too speculative?
So we have done assessments, you saw, like across forecasted modeled traffic. So we've done like assessment, existing conditions, day one of opening, 20-year, 50-year, based on traffic models. Like that's an example. So your volumes have gone up, and pedestrians maybe increased and the like, and you factor all of that in and make your calls as you go. But I'd be very cautious of you just, licking your finger and putting it in the air and going, oh, air traffic's going to double in the next, in the next 5 years. So ask your client that, or look for some traffic modeling or the like.
I think we're good, Ken. Sorry.
Oh, thanks, Kathy.
Oh, okay.
So
I wasn't sure if you froze there for
you're going to get a safe system assessment matrix with things highlighted in yellow, and it might be it's really to get you through the process of, we just want you using the matrix is pretty much it. A little bit of commentary, creating a graph. It's very aligned with what the start of a safe system audit is. Okay, so it's very applicable. You're doing a safe system audit, it's going to make the first portion of that up. It's very much the same. Kathy will show you this shortly. But just last slide from me, I think, is say we're going to send you out to a local site. Okay, it's going to be close to your house or your office, whatever address you gave us. The thing that you'll be looking at, so there'll be the existing conditions, and then you'll get a design. And you're going to assess the existing conditions, then you're going to assess the design. If for some reason it's been built, what is on the design, then you're just going to assess the existing conditions, but hopefully we haven't got any of that. The purpose of you going to the site is just to get that feel for it. How does it operate? Look through this lens, this new lens you're looking at. You don't need to measure lane widths. You don't need to, stick your head and look at the drainage pits, whether they're clogged or not. Like, it's just a general feel for the site, okay? Stay off the road and, cross safely if you got to cross. Don't be a hazard yourself. Don't park in places that block sight lines or push cyclists into traffic. Just be safe. Every one of these sites has been risk assessed by us that it can be done very safely. There's plenty of places to stand back away from traffic and observe, park safely out of the way. We have a safe work method statement that you're just going to have to agree to that says things which, you'll be very comfortable with, like, yes, I'm not going to go out there intoxicated, and I'm going to wear a high visibility vest, and I'm not going to be a hazard myself or put myself in danger standing in, traffic and the like. We just need you to be safe, but we do want you to go to the site because it helps. When you're looking at it through this particular lens, you'll see it helps you in your assessment. So that's it from me. Kathy, I think you're going to take everybody through the learning management system, and I'll just check chat and see if there's anything I think.
Yeah, please, because there's some questions in there from John about requiring a safe system order after a project opening. So if you take those, that'll be good. Okay.
Oh, well, I'll answer that now. So, like,
okay.
It's in the Wakhtahi Safe System Order Guidelines. That's fine. Is it particularly useful? It's more useful just to see that your desires were actually realised on the ground and pick up any maybe slight deficiencies, which a road safety audit post-construction does very well usually in terms of picking up any, they put the wrong coloured RRPMs in, or, the overlap of barrier systems was the wrong way, and those sort of things. The overarching safe system assessment probably doesn't provide a huge amount of value at that point, but maybe it's just verification of what the outcome is.
Okay, so here we are in module 4, and there's that safe work method statement that we mentioned, and please just tick off that you agree that you will abide by the safe work method statement as described. But we're in this section here, which is complete your safe system assessment. Now, what we've done is allocated everyone a site near their home or workplace, and your initials, or sorry, your name is at the end of that one. So look for your name. Now, you might see some where there's multiple people. It just means that other people within the course maybe live or work somewhere nearby. So if you know them and you'd like to do it as a group or go out on site together, you can certainly do that. But we do ask that you each write your own reports and submit your own reports. So you can work together as a group, but then you must each write and submit your own report. So first things first is to check that the site we've given you is somewhere within the location of where you live or work, and that you can feasibly get to it. If it happens to be 400 kilometres away, or you've moved recently or something like that, please send me an email and we'll conjure up a new site. Alternatively, if you find a site that you prefer to do, then feel free to do that as well. Your template is here, and there's also a graph generator. So first thing is I'll take you to the template. And this one is based on the Victorian government template, which is quite comprehensive. And you only need to complete the highlighted sections. So you go through this, everything that is crossed out, you don't need to do. We've made it nice and easy. Anywhere you see a highlighted section, it'll also give you instruction about what you need to do at that highlighted section. So first things first, insert your name only here. So that's all good. Then we're asking you to write up a, just going to zoom in a bit more to bring that onto one page. We're asking you to write up a little summary of the proposed works. So we've given you the design option, and you take a snip of it and you replace this picture with a snip of your site. On your design option, there's also this little bit of information here about traffic volumes. Now, these may not be accurate metrics depending on your particular design and whether we've done it or whether it's one in real life, so to speak. But please just use this for the purposes of being a training exercise. So you give us a short description, just a few sentences here at most, about the design options being assessed, the design drawings, tell us what the speed limit is, and include a picture just there. Now this you'll work out at the end, but basically in here what you need to do is pop in your scores for the existing conditions and the design option once you've worked that out. You replace this graph with your own one that you make in Excel, and we have provided you a graph generator. So if you're not sure how to do that, you would just jump into the graph generator that's available to you there, and you pop in your scores, and like magic, presto, a graph will appear. See? And so on. And you just take a snip of that and pop it in here. And here we are at the matrix. Sorry?
No, keep going, keep going.
Okay, here we are at the matrix section. So this one here, the first one you do is for existing conditions, okay? And we've also done, and again, we've highlighted the bits you need to do, and then we've given you an example one in here as well. So this is merely an example. Now you can delete this one out, you can leave it in there, it doesn't matter. But what we need you to do is pop in your exposure comments, give it a score, likelihood comments, things that increase, things that decrease, give it a score, severity, give it a score, and multiply down for existing conditions. Now it does say for leave design one score blank. So even though it's highlighted, you do leave this particular one blank. Multiply down, add across, do all your columns, and you get a score in here for existing conditions. Then once you've done this one, you copy this whole table, right? So you've got your example in here, and then you paste, and then you start to make changes to your design option one. So in this now, unless the exposure is changing, chances are there won't be any changes there. Here you start to cross out. So here we've crossed out parking through the intersections, doors opening, because our design is telling us that that's not going to be an issue anymore. But we've added in red, some new factors in here. So see how we cross out things that don't apply in the design and we add things in. And then we've also got a change in score. So previously we had this one at 4, and now with our design, it's at 2. So we pop that in red. So any changes you want to pop in here in red. So it's really clear about what is changing. Again, you multiply down your scores and you pop them in here. And now we can see we had an existing of 178 out of 448, and the design score is 127 out of 448.
2 minutes.
Thank you. The last thing for you to do is list some treatments for consideration. So what would make this potentially better? Some primary treatments and some supporting treatments. And where you want to go here is the Safe System Assessment Framework, the Austroads document, which I'll show you where that is. And over here, pages 15 onwards, is this fabulous thing telling you whether it's primary treatments. So here are some treatments, what they influence, severity, likelihood, exposure, and some supporting treatments. Now, these two here are all supporting, the yellow and the orange, if that's what colours you're seeing. But it's telling you, is it a primary treatment? Is it a supporting treatment? So this might also give you some ideas or things to start off with. You've got head-on treatments and so on and so forth in there. You only need to pop in treatments for consideration, not the project response, because you're not responding to it. And then the last thing you do is replace Ken with yourself, because that's what Ken wants to see, more safe system assessors out there. So take a photo of yourself at the site with your high-vis vest on, looking as happy as he does. And that's it. And
then that answers somebody's question. You go to the site. You don't do this online.
This one is not a street view one. Now, this is due on Thursday, the 15th of June. We've got another session next week. So same time next week, no session on the Tuesday, just on the Thursday. And we'll cover off some of the comments that came through earlier today. But you do have 2 weeks. So if you have a look at this and you go, I don't know what I'm doing and I need some more help, then bring those questions to the next session. But PDF it and add a submission, and it's due in 14 days and 7 hours. I think we're out of time. Have we got questions? Or
we're okay. Email them through or organise a one-on-one meeting if you need some help and some coaching. Great session. Well done, everybody. Good luck with your
assessment. Thank you, Ken.
Reach out if you need help.
Yeah. See you later. Bye.